Welcome to XFO Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into a question that might fundamentally reshape how we think about family offices. What is their true purpose? We often speak about wealth preservation, asset management, succession planning, but what if we're missing something deeper? What if the most successful family offices are actually in the business of preserving and creating meaning itself? Today, I want to explore this through the lens of existential philosophy, not because I want to get abstract, but because existentialism offers us the most practical framework for understanding what families with significant wealth are really trying to accomplish across generations. Let's start with a fundamental insight from existential philosophy. Existence precedes essence. What does this mean for a family office? Simply put, families aren't born with predetermined purposes. They must define themselves through continuous choice and action. Your family's legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you create. Think about this for a moment. How many family offices operate as if their purpose is self-evident? We preserve wealth. But why? For what end? Existentialism forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that there is no inherent cosmic purpose to having wealth. The meaning must be constructed deliberately and authentically by the family itself. This brings us to what I call the existential paradox of family offices. With great freedom comes great responsibility. When you have significant resources, you have more choices than most people will ever have. But that freedom can become a burden if it's not grounded in authentic values and purposeful action. I've seen families paralyzed by their own possibilities. Next generation family members who feel trapped not by poverty, but by the weight of unlimited options. The existentialist would say this anxiety is natural. It's the human response to radical freedom. The question isn't how to eliminate this anxiety, but how to transform it into authentic engagement. So how does a family office become what I call an existential steward? First, it must help the family confront the reality of finitude. Yes, we're talking about mortality, both individual mortality and the mortality of the family enterprise itself. Nothing lasts forever. But far from being depressing, acknowledging these boundaries gives urgency and meaning to the choices we make within them. Consider succession planning through this lens. Instead of viewing succession as a necessary evil or a source of family conflict, what if we saw it as the ultimate act of meaning creation? The senior generation isn't just transferring assets, they're articulating their values, their story, their understanding of what the family stands for. They're creating what existentialists call a narrative coherence across generations. But here's where many family offices fall into what existentialists call bad faith, living according to external expectations rather than authentic self-determination. Too often, we see next-generation family members going through the motions, joining the family business because it's expected, pursuing philanthropy that looks good on paper but doesn't reflect genuine passion, making investment decisions based on what other families are doing rather than what aligns with their values. The role of the family office then becomes helping family members discover and act on their authentic commitments. This might mean supporting a family member who wants to start their own venture outside the family business. It might mean restructuring governance to allow for genuine dissent and debate rather than forced consensus. It might mean accepting that some family members will choose paths that don't directly serve the family enterprise and supporting them anyway, because authenticity serves the deeper purpose of meaning creation. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. Instead of traditional investment committees focused solely on risk-adjusted returns, imagine investment committees that start with the question, what does this investment say about who we are and what we value? This doesn't mean ignoring financial performance. It means understanding that sustainable long-term performance often comes from investments aligned with genuine conviction rather than fleeting market trends. Similarly, philanthropic strategy becomes less about tax efficiency or social recognition and more about identifying problems the family genuinely cares about solving. When philanthropy emerges from authentic engagement rather than obligation, it becomes a source of meaning rather than just a line item in the family's activities. But perhaps the most profound insight from existential philosophy for family offices is this: the anxiety, the uncertainty, the difficult conversations about purpose and values, these aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They're signs that the family is engaging with the fundamental questions that give life meaning. I want to challenge our listeners to think about this. What if the primary purpose of your family office isn't to make the family's life easier, but to make it more meaningful? What if instead of insulating family members from difficulty and uncertainty, the family office's role is to help them engage with these challenges in authentic and constructive ways? This requires what existentialists call existential courage, the willingness to act and create meaning even in the face of uncertainty. For family offices, this might mean being willing to have uncomfortable conversations about values and purpose. It might mean supporting family members in taking risks that don't guarantee success, but offer the possibility of authentic achievement. It also means recognizing that each generation will need to recreate meaning for themselves. The values and purposes that drove the wealth-creating generation may not speak authentically to their children and grandchildren. Rather than seeing this as failure or drift, an existentially informed family office sees this as natural and healthy. The question isn't whether the family will change across generations, it's whether those changes will be conscious and deliberate, rooted in genuine reflection and choice, or unconscious and reactive, driven by external pressures and unexamined assumptions. As we think about the future of family offices, I believe those that embrace this existential dimension will have a significant advantage. They'll attract and retain better talent, both within the family and among professional staff, because people are motivated by purpose, not just compensation. They'll make better long-term decisions because they're grounded in deep conviction rather than short-term optimization. And they'll build stronger family cohesion because they'll have answered the question that underlies all others. Why does this family matter? But I want to end with a question for our audience, because this conversation doesn't end with this podcast. It begins here. If you're involved with a family office, either as a family member or a professional, I challenge you to consider what would change if your family office took seriously its role as a steward of meaning, not just money. What conversations would you need to have? What processes would you need to redesign? What assumptions would you need to question? The existential insight is that meaning isn't something we discover, it's something we create through authentic engagement with the fundamental questions of human existence. For families with significant wealth, those questions become: what is our wealth for? What do we stand for beyond our balance sheet? And how do we use our resources to create authentic significance, not just financial returns? These are not easy questions, and they don't have predetermined answers. But engaging with them honestly and courageously, that's where real legacy begins. Thank you for joining me on XFO Intelligence Podcast. I'm genuinely interested in continuing this conversation with those of you who find these ideas compelling. The author of today's research is open to exploring these concepts further with audience members who want to dig deeper into how existential philosophy can inform family office practice. Until next time, keep questioning, keep creating meaning, and remember, existence precedes essence, especially in the world of family offices.